So the next couple of times we meet, I'm going to try to incorporate some discussion questions, do more of a group discussion than a sermon as we're looking at 1 Timothy. Can turn off the monitor. So here's an icebreaker to prime the pump, as they say. And you all had a chance to look at it, most of you, so I'm expecting at least one answer. What's a conversation that you've had or overheard that started deep but went absolutely nowhere? And none of these examples better include me. All right, I'm warning you right now. Remember that one time, Pastor, that we were talking about, and I don't know what you were saying. Nobody wants to tell on anybody else. Well, I could probably come up with loads of examples if my memory were good enough. I'm sure I've had, especially, honestly, as a pastor, you definitely get into some spiritual conversations and you're like, I don't know what we're talking about right now. I do remember the discussion about Jesus being a teenager and whether or not he thought about girls at all. And I think that has implications for men's ministry, but the discussion definitely went absolutely nowhere. And one time we had a discussion, I think it was in hermeneutics class. See, if you want to have these kind of discussions, you have to go to Bible school. And then you'll have all kinds of spiritual conversations that go absolutely nowhere, believe me. But so we were in hermeneutics class, and I'm pretty sure we were talking about whether dogs go to heaven. And that one was a waste of time, in my opinion. I'm not sure I got a single thing out of that. But today's theme is when religion gets in the way. We're looking at 1 Timothy 1, 3-7. And the main point being, really, if you want to sum it up in just a couple of, or one sentence, some things sound spiritual, but they're just noise. Real faith isn't about speculation. It's about performance. It's about love, clean heart, and faith in Jesus Christ. So we're going to I'll read that section. When I left from Macedonia, Paul writing to Timothy here, I urged you to stay in Ephesus and stop those whose teaching is contrary to the truth. Don't let them waste their time in endless discussions of myths, spiritual pedigrees. These things only lead to meaningless speculations which don't help people live a life of faith in God. The purpose of my instruction is that all believers would be filled with love that comes from a pure heart, a clear conscience, and a genuine faith. Some people miss this whole point. Turned away from these things, spend their time in meaningless discussions. They want to be known as teachers of the law of Moses, but they don't know what they're talking about, even though they speak so confidently. So, first question, what stands out to you in this passage? A line of phrase that grabbed your attention? Yeah, that's for me, yeah, these things only lead to meaningless speculations which don't help people live a life of faith in God. That kind of really puts a fine point on it, doesn't it? Is this just meaningless speculation, or is it helping people live a life of faith in God? And that applies to that's something every pastor needs to just take to heart. Stuff we're doing today is the stuff I'm talking about. Is it helping people live a life of faith in God in our day and age? Good point, Paul. So Paul warns Timothy not just about bad theology, but about unhelpful spirituality. There's ideas that sound deep, but they don't lead anywhere. Not about how clever something sounds, all about whether it builds faith, produces love, strengthens hearts. And it shows its way in so many ways in religion. Like I always get, one of my hobby horses when somebody's saying, now what this really means, you read a passage and then now what this really means, or there's a hidden code in the Bible or whatever, stuff like that, right? We're wrapped up in finding the deep meaning, and we miss just the plain truth right there. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. That's all you really need to know. If you know that, you know what you need to know. And he died for you, and he rose again for you, and if you put your trust in him, you'll be saved. That's what you really need to know. Well, what about the deeper stuff? Well, let the rabbis debate about that. What you really need to know, Jesus said it pretty clearly, right? What's the most important thing? Love God and love people. If you do that, you're taking care of everything else. It's not really as deep as you may make it. So if we're going to do a talk on this passage, if I was going to do an outline, it would be something like this. Point 1, distractions that drain. Point 2, religious rules without redemptive relationship. And point 3, the fruit of real faith. And my outline kind of puts Paul's thoughts in a different order because I like to end with the positive application thing. So here we go. Point 1, distractions that drain. What sounds deep isn't always true. Verse 3 and 4. Ephesus was a spiritually intense, religiously diverse place. And again, it's not really about bad doctrine that Paul's warning about. It's about distractions that drain. For these folks, it was myths and spiritual pedigrees, status, heritage, speculation, obsessions with rabbit trails. In our modern context, what do you think that looks like? Do you see Christians, or more importantly yourself, wasting energy on things that don't really help yourself or anyone else live a life of faith? Who wants to take a stab at that? I think we all have our thing. Like, especially it varies from denomination to denomination, or even just the kind of that, like, it's not as big of a deal anymore, but it used to be, like, which translation was the best translation. You know, if you read the Bible, you need to read this translation. You can't read that one because it doesn't translate it right, and all those kind of things. Or this is what a Christian needs to do, and it might even be a good thing, but we might emphasize it too much or put it in a box. Like, we need to pray. Yeah, that's true. But if I say, you need to pray this much, and you need to pray in this way, or even at this time, then I distort it, right? I put a burden on you. It's something that takes away from something that's really wonderful and really great. We can talk to God. We can talk to him anytime. But then it puts a burden on people like this. Well, I'm not praying right. That's like me saying, you're not talking to me right. Hey, Pastor, how's it going? You're not talking to me right. Talk to me in a different way, and then God's not like that. And in my heart, that's exactly what's wrong with religion. And the more I think about it, there was especially some useless Bible discussions. As I was doing this myself, I was like, yeah, that reminds me of... And I remember actually saying to a friend of mine, it doesn't matter. And we were good enough friends that meant something to him. Like he wasn't... Like sometimes I'm blunt and harsh, and I still am. I have more grace now than I used to. I was more blunt and harsh. You think I'm blunt and harsh now? You should have known me when I was 20. There's too much bloat in religion. Keep the main thing. Forget about all the religious noise. That's what I took about it. Point 2, religious rules without redemptive relationship, or religion that misses the point. And that's verse 6 and 7, because that's what Paul says. Some people have missed the whole point. So here's the question. Have you ever found yourself missing the whole point? Chasing an overcomplicated faith? And if so, what helped bring you back? And that's how you really know that that's a spirit-given gift to a person. That we all have our different gifts that God has given us, and if somebody's able just to talk to anybody and they're not even offended or whatever, you just know that that's really a spirit-led conversation. That's really, God has gifted that person to be able to do that. But I think what you're saying is really, really correct, really right on. Like we need to hear people, and it's like I wrote something kind of similar. Like I need to remember on a regular basis that I want to love God and love people and whittle away everything else, because you can be, you can get blinders on or whatever, or you can say, well, you're not supposed to do that. And so now I can't really like you because you're doing that kind of stuff that we don't like. Whereas really Jesus was hanging out with sinners, right? Like the Bible tells us that. He loved people. He modeled for us what it was all about. Whittle away anything else that hinders loving God and loving people. If there's anything getting in the way of that, I need to get that out of the way, because that's not the true gospel. And sometimes that means, for myself, just looking at my own context, being okay with not pleasing people. Because if somebody comes and they say, well, I'm looking for this or that, and, I want a church that does this or that, and just being okay with saying, well, you're maybe not going to find that here. And on the flip side, something I knew I had to share a lot, because everybody's like, well, it's so easy to feel superior. Like you guys are all wrapped up in your religion, but I'm free. So pride is always knocking at the door, looking for a place to jam its foot into. Like You have your liturgies and your polished worship bands and your Christian activities to keep your congregation busy all through the week, and you spend your millions on your plush buildings and your sweet audio visual presentations, but I'm too spiritual for that. That's definitely where pride can come in. Yeah, for sure. And then that just turns me to anyone else that's bringing into the wind. Devil is always looking for some place to trip us up. Like Paul says in Romans 2:1, you may think you can condemn such people, but you're just as bad, and you have no excuse. When you say they're wicked and should be punished, you're condemning yourself. For you who judge others do the very same things. And Jesus said in Matthew 7, hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your eye, then you'll be able to see well enough to get the speck out of your friend's eye. I try to remember those things all the time, and it's just 1 Corinthians in a different context, where some of you are saying, I follow Paul, and others saying, I follow Apollos, or I follow Peter. Or, and I always think of this, like the really spiritual people is like, I follow Christ. You know, you follow Paul, I follow Jesus. So, need to remind myself, got to be on guard all the time. These folks aren't trying to be evil. They just want to sound smart, look important. Maybe most importantly, I think most importantly, like, because I kind of what you're saying, Judy, is they're trying to be spiritual, and if you're not hearing that, or if they're maybe just looking for somebody. Does somebody care about what I'm going through? I don't really want you to solve my problem. I just want to know you care that I have a problem. Sometimes, right? We're venting, we're complaining, but it's not because we expect anybody to fix it. We just want to know somebody cares, and we're all trying to connect with God, trying to find something that helps in a world without hope. So if someone says you got to do this or whatever, like what do we know? Like a lot of us, right? Like all the other people are doing this and that, and they seem to be having their stuff all together, so maybe I should do this or that. But the truth is, none of us has our lives all together. Some of us are just better at hiding it. And again, I recognize pride in my own life, because when I'm standing here, I try really hard not to put on a show. Like I try to be authentic. I try to be honest. And if I start shouting or kind of getting excited, I hope it's because I am excited and not because I'm trying to push your buttons. But I couldn't stand here and say before God that that's always the reason. I can't say there's never the motive to sound cool or to sound spiritual or impress somebody. But the best stuff I say is not the stuff I say the loudest, but the stuff that hits me the hardest. And I'm sure you can feel that. Like, you know when it's like, this is coming from my heart and it's not just, God says, you know. Just because somebody says something with fire doesn't mean it came from heaven. In fact, it might have come from the other place. Paul's saying it's not just false doctrine, but sometimes it's empty religion with a loud voice. Religion without relationship. And the third thing here is the real fruit of faith. Verse 5 says the purpose of real instruction is to produce real faith. So what does Paul say really matters in a life lived with God? Yeah. That's Paul's filter for what really matters. It's love, not ego, not winning arguments. Like I think he's putting that there because love is not proud, it's not easily offended. Like all of Corinthians 13, he's kind of laying that all out there. It's not about if you're right. It's if you love. And he's backed up by Jesus, who I mentioned earlier, said the greatest commandments. Teacher, what's the greatest commandment? These two things. Love God with all you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. Do those two things and man, you're doing really, really well. Well, I don't know all the law and the prophets. That's okay. Love God, love people. God's going to be happy about that. And a pure heart, which is clean motives, good intentions, honest intentions, clear conscience, no hidden guilt, hypocrisy. I always keep Psalm 24 in my heart as a warning. Like I remind myself of this time to time. Who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord? Who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, does not lift his soul up to what is false, does not swear deceitfully. And then a genuine faith. It's not, a performance. It's something that's real. Like we're saying there, real. Jesus is real. He's real to me. Not just something I read there. Jesus is real, man. So how would you sum that up in your own words? If someone was to say, what's this passage all about? What does that mean? How do I live for God? How would you put that in your own words? Yeah, one way to put it was if it doesn't grow your heart or your love, it doesn't give you clean your conscience and deepen your trust in Jesus, maybe it's not worth your time. So here's a personal, and I don't expect anybody to, but if you do want to share, where you're at right now. Like which of these do you feel most drawn to? I guess you've been kind of sharing. Some of you have already sort of shared about this. What do you feel most drawn to, and what's hardest for you out of these things here? Don said like a place where people love, and Glenn's like, don't tell me what to do. Which I resonate with. I mean, that's, yeah. Don't tell me what to do. Yeah, I'm kind of sensitive to that myself. Like on the other side, if I'm saying something and somebody's just jumping in there, then I'm like, well, you don't really care what I have to say, and then I don't. Yeah, for me, love instead of pride. That part, like, is pride here or is it love? That's always a challenge that I have to look at. And something that I'm drawn to is just real faith without being religious. I'm always drawn to that. Just real faith without being religious. So here's something to reflect on. Spiritual detox. If your soul had a junk drawer, what's in it? We haven't. This conversation really didn't go in this way, but part of the idea all here is also is there people you listen to, things you watch that are just distracting or cluttering your relationship with God, stuff that isn't helpful. And for myself, I just thought, it's not really spiritual things because I don't really tune into a bunch of stuff like that. Like if there's all kinds of, I don't even listen to myself, I'm not really interested in listening to people preaching, and sometimes, and usually that's God has drawn me to that. Like almost always, God draws me to something and I listen to it. I'm like, yeah, that spoke to my heart and it's something that I could share here. Usually that's how that works. But so I'm not really distracted by I tune lots of things out, honestly. But things that aren't spiritual, like just worldly cares, stress at my second job, not enough time, taking enough time off, stuff, that kind of stuff just robs me from paying attention to God more. That's what I kind of took. Like if I have a junk drawer, it's not so much spiritual, it's more worldly cares, I would say. So here's an application. What conversations, YouTube preachers, theological hot takes, or internal attitudes are cluttering your walk with Jesus? You don't have to answer that, but just something to think on. That's our takeaway from today. Are you chasing clarity or controversy? Are you arguing more than praying? Consuming content that builds my faith, feeds my pride. And when you're tempted to argue or speculate, here's a question that we can ask. Is this helping anyone love Jesus more? I mean, bottom line it. Is this helping anyone love Jesus more? And I say it's a reminder today, our little talk is just that the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is Jesus.